Welcome to your weekly episode of Only Dead Fish Go with the Flow. I think a lot of my listeners will be quite happy to hear that we're back on the topic of rowing. So we have Ana Žigić with us today. I'm hoping I absolutely nailed that pronunciation.
You did. It's good. It's good.
Thank you. So we're back on rowing. Me and Anna are actually connected through a friend of mine, but we have worked out that in 2017 there may have been a crossover at Bucks in some sort of rowing capacity. Anna did some rowing at Bristol and some rowing as a junior, but more importantly, she was part of the four-woman team that went across the Atlantic Ocean in 2024 for the There She Rose campaign group.
Yeah, there she rose as our team. Yeah.
Welcome, Anna, to the podcast, and thank you so much for coming on. Could you sort of name and explain yourself to the podcast and to the world?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I would describe myself as a very average rower personally. I feel like I am within rowing prowess here with your experience and rowing for the national team and probably a lot of your listeners. I've always considered myself a distinctly average rower, but I had to just find a way to make it a little bit more impressive. So I rowed across the Atlantic.
You're like, trump card.
Yeah, my husband's a flat water rower as well, and I love to absolutely tell him that rowing the Atlantic was harder than winning Henley, and he just loves hearing that, as you can imagine. I feel like I'm going to get myself in hot water saying that on a podcast with lots of rowers listening. No, they're equally as hard, I would say, actually. Yeah, I've been rowing since like 2009. I started rowing at school, mainly because I have zero hand-eye coordination and was a disaster at all things involving a bowl, despite my love of bowl sports. So I got sent to the depths of the Thames in the middle of the winter, and I absolutely hated it. I just did not enjoy rowing at all at the time. And it wasn't until I think it's like 10 or 11, they start deciding like the squad properly. And you got invited to Saturday training or you didn't. And I didn't, obviously, because I put no effort in. And I was like, this is a personal affront. How dare they? And decided to just knuckle down and start taking rowing a bit more seriously and started rowing for the school team. And then rowing was a bit off and on for me for a few health reasons. So I had to quit shortly after leaving school. I was in a lot of pain. I mean, I was in pain for a few years at this point. I thought it was a sports injury. It turned out it was endometriosis, but I didn't know at the time. And then after my first surgery, sort of coincided with, it was about a month before I went to Bristol. And I was starting uni again, and because I'd taken some time out of uni, and I thought, what's the easiest way to make friends as a rower? It's to join the rowing team. And went to their preseason, and it was day and night difference post my surgery, and started rowing there and absolutely loved it. And then, COVID happened, entered the world of work, was feeling a little bit untethered, didn't know what to do. And I was on LinkedIn one day and I saw someone who was in my industry posting on LinkedIn that they were looking to build a crew to row across the Atlantic Ocean, a crew of women. And I just blacked out and I applied on this Google form and got selected, and the rest is history. And then rowed the ocean, and we are the fastest British women's crew to do so. And we rowed it in just under 40 days.
That is just such a flex. And I do think, Henley winning and Atlantic rowing, I think Atlantic rowing would definitely take the biscuit. We had a phone call before we started the podcast, and you were talking about it, and I was like, how, as a flat water rower, were you like, yeah, that's what I want to do? Because it is honestly my idea of hell. Like, I had a wind app on my phone, and I would like check what the wind was going to be the night before I had a session, so I could be like, okay, if it's really bad when I get down there, at least I'm like mentally prepared. So just the idea of 40 days rowing, and talk us through like the boat, like how did that work? Was there like rotation, well, little cabin, and you rotated through?
Yeah, so we had an ocean rowing boat called an RX-45. We bought a brand new one for the occasion, which took a lot of fundraising. And we named her Sarabi, after the Queen of the Lions and the Lion King. Because if anyone knows about our row, it was completely centered around raising the awareness about the dropout rate of girls in sport. And we were really inspired by the Lionesses Euro run, the previous Euro run. We just had another one now. So we wanted the boat to be an honor to them. And the boat it was a carbon fiber boat, which is like slightly alarming when you think about how thin that is against ocean waves and ocean wildlife. And the way it works, this thing is just over 9 meters long, but then it's only like 1.5 meters wide. So like you stretch out your arms and your arms are hanging over the side of the boat. And you have the deck, which has 3 seats, three like functional rowing seats, and then you have a little cabin on either end. So we were in a team of 4, which meant that our standard rowing pattern was typically 2 hours on, 2 hours off, and you would switch out with your cabin mate. So you and your cabin mate were constantly switching, and same with the stern cabin. I was in the bow cabin. And then in your cabin, you have like a little mattress where you keep all your stuff. It doesn't stay dry for very long. On deck, you have the 3 seats. You're always clipped onto the second you step out of the cabin, you clip yourself onto this like guide rail. God forbid you go overboard, you're still connected to the boat. We did have 2 women go overboard across our row. And then everything under the hull, so under the rowing seats, is like where we store our water maker to desalinate seawater for drinking water, where we stored all our food, all our equipment, everything. And in the stern cabin, we also had all the electrics, so like our chart plotter and our radio and things like that. So it's quite a simple life on the boat. There's not a lot of space. And yes, you switch on and off every 2 hours, but we also did do every day when we voluntarily like gave up 2 hours of rest and rowed an extra 2 hours, which means that the third seat would also be in play. And when we started off, for the first like I want to say the first 12 hours of the row, might have been the first 24, it's all a blur. We did 3 up, which meant that we did 2 hours on, 40 minutes off, constantly switching. So no one had more than 40 minutes of break for the first like day. And then we switched into this like voluntary. So, some people preferred to row extra at night, some people preferred to row extra in the day. So you had the choice of when you put your extra 2 hours down. And that was just to get a bit more power on the oars, really, and go a little bit faster.
Well, I mean, that would be the reason why you guys did it the quickest, basically, or in the
Yeah, we
40
did come
days.
second in the women's category, quickest women's crew from the UK to do it so far. But in our year, our year was a very stressful year. We were racing pretty much the whole way through against an American crew who were amazing. They were called Salty Science, and when we got on to land, the first thing people said was like, it was so frustrating. We were just constantly watching this happen on the app. But they just pipped us in the last like week, and we just couldn't catch them up again. They were 4 women who I think marine biologists, so they all had a lot of ocean experience, and they were just amazing.
I didn't know you were racing as well. That adds like such an extra element to it. And were there days where you just weren't going to get anywhere? Like, were the conditions so bad you just had to like hunker down and hope for the best, and that you didn't drift too far off course?
Yeah, our year had a really fast start, especially for the crews at the front of the pack. So we got out quite quickly out the gates. And we went quite far south. We didn't go the furthest south. So when you open the app, for example, and you see everyone's racing lines, it's wild because I think we had like almost 40 crews our year. And we only ever saw another boat once. That was Salty Science. And when I say we saw them, we saw their light flashing in the dark 2 kilometers away from us at night once. But the rest of the time, your race is very different from anyone else's because out on the ocean, someone just a few K away can be having totally different weather conditions. You have all these different pockets. Like the windy app is crazy. It's like swirls everywhere. So we went quite far south, started off quite quick. Everything was going really well. The first like 10 days were crazy. We had enormous waves, but they were going our direction. So we were just flying. And then it was around halfway through the row, pretty much the whole fleet just got absolutely hit with basically wind going the wrong way. And we just ground to quite literally a halt, which was quite emotionally devastating when you're racing. And we basically started getting pushed off course. We had a weather router who was our coach, and we sort of called him on the sat phone. He said, if you can't hold this bearing, you need to go on power anchor. So Obviously, when you're in the ocean, it's 5 kilometers deep below you in the middle of the Atlantic. So there's no anchor, obviously, deep enough. So what we have is just a parachute, and you throw it out over the bow end of the boat, and it basically creates a lot of drag, and it will stop you dead in your tracks, basically, and it stops you from being dragged the wrong way back to Cape Verde, basically. So we had to put out our power anchor, I think it was 3 times across 3 days. And that can be really stressful because you would think it's nice to have a rest, and we did take the opportunity to clean the boat and, clean the bottom of the boat and clean the deck. Everything gets really gross. Have a shower ourselves, get a little bit of sleep. But the reality is you're actually just sat there. You have 2 flags at the end of your stern cabin. And I just sat there for like an hour staring at the flags, just willing them to turn the other way. I was like, please point west, please point west. Because you're just frustrated, right? Like, you have a goal in mind. We had a time goal in mind. We had a record that we wanted to go for. The world record for a women's crew was actually 34 days, and we did it in 39. And like, we knew at that point that that was gone for us. So it's quite emotionally tense on the boat when that happens. And then the other thing is the app, obviously, it pings every 2 hours, and then all our family and friends would see on this app that our boat was pointing in the wrong direction. And they're texting, my husband was our point of contact. He was the one who had he ran like the family group chat, and we would give him information. And his phone would be blowing up, going like, what's going on? Are they okay? Are they all right? Why are they pointing the wrong way? Why are they moving at 0.1 knots? So yeah, that did happen. It was very unpleasant.
I can just like visualize you like staring at the flag, and you're like
Literally.
trying to change the wind direction.
Literally. And at a certain point, you get so overwhelmed and your brain is so tired from lack of sleep that I just took it down to the most basic thing. It was kind of later in the day, so the sun was west. And I was like, just hoping the flag would just like flick towards the sun. And eventually it did. And I was like, we have to go now.
That's crazy. So the sleep schedule is like completely dictated around the conditions.
Yeah. When it was harder conditions, obviously we would try and go 3 up a bit more. So you'd get less sleep. But yeah, sleep was hard. And typically we say 2 hours rest, but there wasn't 2 hours of sleep. So, we would be rowing 14 hours a day. You get 10 hours of rest. Realistically, yeah. I mean, some crews, I think, did manage better sleep. They had different sleep schedules. So some crews would switch to 3 hours on, 3 hours off at night. We stuck to 2, but in the day, the cabins were so hot. Even though we're rowing in December, the Atlantic, obviously, we were south of the Northern Atlantic, so we were right in the middle, basically, on the equator, just a little bit above it, actually. So it's roasting in the day, especially when there are no clouds. And then the cabins have solar panels on top, so they withdraw in loads of heat. So inside the cabin, actually, like, it's hot enough to get heat stroke. So we would be on deck. But then on deck, when you have 3 people rowing, there's like maybe like 6 inches of space behind the bow seat to sit. So we would like pass out, sat up against the wall of the cabin.
Like, I'm just going to take a nap right here.
Yeah, with your legs on either side. Imagine trying to row with someone's like legs on your riggers, like being straddled, literally, or like them eating like crunchy food behind you. Like, you just have to accept this. And then at night, when you finish your shift, I mean, the Mother Nature is a fickle creature, because you would have a shift where you're totally dry and like you're so happy and you have 5 minutes left and you're so excited to get into the cabin and go to sleep. And quite literally, in like your last 10 strokes, a wave will come and dump a bucket of water over your head, and you'll be completely soaking. And that in itself is a problem, because you're now salty and you can't go to sleep while you're salty because your skin just degrades. So you then, you have to do your shift change, and then you have to get a rag with fresh water and wipe yourself down. You get into your cabin, you have to do your skincare, because like your skin just would degrade, especially where you're sitting. You then need to eat something. If you want to call home, you have to get outside on the sat phone. So you basically become very efficient at doing this all in the space of like 10 to 15 minutes, so you can try and maximize your sleep.
Mm.
But then sleep also is a little bit tricky. I remember for me, towards the end, we never capsized. Quite a few crews did capsize our year, but we had 2 pretty bad knockdowns. So where we were completely on our side on 180 degrees. Both times that happened, I actually was during my off break. So the first time wasn't too bad, but the second time I was like dead asleep. And I woke up to the sound of like a roaring wave. And I woke up pretty much as it connected to the side of our boat. and it flung me into the other side of the cabin, and I was completely winded, and we just started turning and turning and turning and turning, and I just suddenly realized I was laying on the wall rather than the floor, and my side of the cabin with all my pockets along the side was suddenly above me, and all my, like, stuff was falling on top of me, and I was just thinking, "Oh my god, like another inch and we're gonna go over and I'm gonna fly into the roof and break my nose." And then we just stalled there. Vicky, our captain, was on deck and I just heard her scream like, "Everybody to the left!" Like, now my mind is failing me with that port side or I think it's starboard. Yeah, I was like, "Everyone to starboard!" And we like threw ourselves to the side and like slowly came back around. But that was towards the end, and honestly, for the next, like, 5 nights, I found it really hard, like, the whole body remembers pain thing, like, I couldn't, like, get my body to, like, calm down. I'd, like, lie
Mm.
down and I'd just be so tense, just waiting for that to happen again.
You're, like, trying to go to sleep and you've got that feeling of falling, but it's, like,
Yeah.
flipping.
Yeah, and I was just like, "Oh, I just know the second I relax, it'll happen, we'll get a rogue wave, and it's gonna hurt so much."
Oh, that really is, like, in my mind, so hellish, like, being in
Yeah.
a hot, small cabin and then like, you're
Like
being
in a
flipped
tumble
is
dryer.
making my palms sweaty just listening to you tell me about it.
There are a lot of beautiful moments on the Atlantic, I will
A
say.
beautiful moment. Well, that actually leads us on because 'cause we've got best and worst moments, so I don't know whether or not you can just pick them out of thin air or whether or not that was a worst moment for you.
The worst moment is where I got food poisoning. I will give you that. And seasickness in general. We were all seasick for 3 days. That was horrendous, but, worst moment was one night I was exhausted and I opened one of my, like, ration packs, the powder, put water in it, let it prep, whatever, and I started eating it and I remember thinking, "God, this tastes so sour," but I was so hungry and so tired, I just kept eating it. My guess is it somehow had a hole in it and some water or air got in. Did my off shift, woke up from my off shift immediately thinking, "God, something is wrong." And got onto the oars and then, it was very unwell. Got about half an hour to 40 minutes in before I was like, "I can't." But the wind was too strong for Ellie, who I was rowing with at the time, to row alone. Didn't want to wake up Abby, who I had just swapped with, because it had only been half an hour. So very feebly went over to Vicky, our captain, who'd I think been asleep for about an hour and a half at this point, and I had to be like, or maybe it was an hour. I had to be like, "I'm so sorry, mate. Like, I need you to come back on the oars because I am too busy hanging my head over the side of the boat to be able to row." And it was so windy, and when the wind catches you and you don't have enough power, it can like knock you sideways, and then your rudder basically acts as a brake. So you get pinned side on and you're not moving anywhere, and it's horrendous. So I was like, "We need more power on the oars." And that was really hard, not only because of the being sick in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, but taking someone else's rest away from them is like emotional turmoil. That was really hard. I felt horrible, but Vicky was an amazing captain and was like, "Stop being an idiot, just go lie down, and try and keep some food in you." So that was by far the worst.
I was gonna say that is a lot of personal admin out in the ocean.
Yeah.
Food poisoning is, like, major personal admin when you're, in a house at home, but on the ocean, the
Yeah.
logistics of that.
You just have to get over it. Like, I didn't wanna make Vicky do more than one shift like that, so 2 hours later, I was back on the oars, you know? Like, just every so often just being a bit like, "Oh, just a bit green over the gills, just give me a second."
Oh.
No, it was horrendous. Best moment? 2 best moments, I would say, hard to pick. One was when on day 25, after having seen no other faces than our own on the boat, we got visited by a super yacht. So their skipper had done the row a few years prior and was doing a delivery, so it was just crew on this, like, amazing yacht, who were actually going also from the Canaries to Antigua. And they saw us on their chart plotter, and on their AIS system, and we were rowing along and all of a sudden our AIS started going off like an alarm bell telling us we were on collision course. So Vicky went into the cabin to go see like what's going on because we couldn't see any boats. It was daytime. But it starts pinging from about like 2K away. And with the waves, like it can be hard to see even like a few 100 meters sometimes. And then they radioed us and they said, "Hey, we're coming to say hi." And we got so excited. And they pulled up right next to us, and they can't give you anything because if you get any support on this row, you get disqualified from the race. But they pulled up next to us and dragged a speaker onto deck and played Eye of the Tiger, said hi to us, like, just it was really over we were in tears. But the other thing was we had this, this thing called a BGAN that you point at a satellite and it gives you very, very slow Wi-Fi. We broke it on day 1, so we weren't able to ever send much content back to our social media manager or to, like, anyone. So we asked them to take a photo of us and send it to our social media manager only so she could post it, but also so our families could, like, see us.
You're like, "Here
Um
is the evidence. We are alive."
Yeah. And then, like, after that went up, like, I called my mum on the sat phone later that day, and she's like, "Oh my god, it's so nice to see you, like, alive and well." So that was nice. And then the other best moment was we had just been rowing at night, and it was, like, horrendous pounding rain all night, and it just, like, hits you with such force. And it was, like, just the break of sunrise, and Ellie and I were on the oars, and there was just, like, the flickers of light coming over the horizon, and I just heard something that sounded like a blowhole, and I didn't wanna say that I'd heard it because I didn't wanna get our hopes up to then not see anything because wildlife was honestly, like, few and far between. And I just kind of, like, was looking out on the horizon, and just as I said to Ellie, I finally went, "Did you hear that?" A bunch like, a pod of pilot whales started jumping around our boat, and they hung out with us for, like, quite a while. I'd say, like, 20 minutes or so, and they had a baby with them, and they were just, like, popping out. Like, pilot whales are, like, sort of, like, really big dolphins, they kind of look like with, like, a snub face, and they were so cute, and they just, like they got really, really close, like, almost touching our oars, just hanging out, like, jumping around us, mum, baby, like, some really big ones, and we were just like, "God, that's so cool," like, it's sunrise in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and this pod of whales is just checking us out, and that
It's
was
just
really cool.
magical.
Yeah.
Such a magical moment. It's like I was actually gonna say it's the stuff of, like, Facebook posts that you're like, "Is that
100%.
AI?"
Yeah, and we had a similar thing with dolphins coming morning as well, and it's like, when you're on the hardest parts of the Atlantic, like, we used to just keep thinking. And my skipper was really good at sort of, like, nudging us to this thought process. It was like, no one's ever unless someone does this, they're not gonna experience any of this, and, fewer people have rowed an ocean than have climbed Everest, for example, and you just have to remind yourself, like, even in the hardest experiences, you're part of such a small club of people who get to do this, and there's, like, a gratefulness that needs to be experienced to, like, actually be able to do it, was a 2-year campaign to fundraise, to grind, like, it was so stressful, the actual campaign. I mean, like, we were having invoices come in right before the row that we were like, "Oh, I haven't seen them, sorry," like, and, we just about managed to pay everything off, and up until the moment, like, our oar was pushed off from the side, like, it was really high stress. And then when you're rowing, like, it's hard, but all you need to do is row, if that makes sense? So, you just get to sort of enjoy and actually, like, sit in the process a bit, the hard bits and the good bits, and it was, like, totally worth it. And then when you finish, you forget about all the hard parts until you start thinking about doing it again, and then you start thinking about doing it again, and you're like, "Oh, actually, there were some really rough parts to that whole process."
Are you gonna do it again, do you think?
Maybe. Yes. Um, yes, I am going to do it again.
Oh, that is amazing. Have you got any plans laid out yet, or is it top
I
secret?
No, I do. We actually have a team page on Instagram already. Our team is called Through the Blue, and on this occasion, it's 2 men, 2 women, so it's a mixed crew, of 2 couples. So, it's a bit of a social experiment. We'll see how it goes.
This sounds like Olivia Attwood from ITV needs to be
Oh,
on board and
100%.
record.
Honestly, it sounds like it could be on ITV, right? Like, it sounds like fully like a reality TV show. We'll see how it goes.
We've picked 2 couples and they're gonna row the Atlantic Ocean together and nothing's gonna go wrong.
You're right, maybe I should pitch ITV for a TV show.
Yeah, maybe you should just wear a GoPro, like, the whole way over.
Yeah, no, you're right. I did not take enough content on my last row. I have to get into the habit of it.
Can imagine I can imagine being in the ocean and being like, "I just need to get this really expensive phone out," or, like, a camera or whatever it is, and it just to I'll just take a quick snapshot, and it's like once you've taken one picture of the back of someone's head with a load of water behind, you've taken 1,000, like, I
Yes.
have so many pictures of myself doing, like, my own rowing, and it's just a big load of blue and like me in the middle of each picture every time. Like it doesn't get more and more interesting unless I've done my makeup, and then it is a bit more interesting.
Yeah. I think when I was, like, doing socials for my previous row, people would get very curious about the mundane. I mean, the number one question we would get on, like, our Instagram and TikTok is, like, "Where do you go to the toilet?" Or, like, "How do you shower?" And what, you know, you get some really funny questions where you realize how much you normalize, like, this process of rowing. You know, by the time you're rowing the ocean, as I said, you've been campaigning for years, to raise the money to, like, do all that. So you're like, "Oh, this is, like, a totally normal thing to do." And you'll get questions from people being like, "Well, what do you stop at night?" And it's like, "Well, where would we stop? You know, there are no islands in the middle of the Atlantic." Like, and they're like, "Oh, well, do you have a boat following you?" And it's like, "No." So, and you realize like that to like almost like a detriment, you've completely normalized it, and you're just like, actually, I should probably recognize that this is a bit more mad than I'm giving it credit for.
Mm. You're talking about it like you're gonna pop to Big Tesco on a Saturday
Yeah.
night.
But you do so much training, and the safety officers wouldn't let you start if they didn't believe that you could do it. So you have to prove so much to do it. So many qualifications, you know, a minimum of 120 hours my year. I think they've upped it now to 150 hours as a crew on your boat. The safety requirements are very strict. So you do once you're out there, one of the main questions I got when I was doing, like, the interviews off the back of it, like, "Were you scared?" And I think, as I said, like, the scared came from, like, the physical reaction to pain, so, like, after that hard knock, I was like, physically quite stressed, but I can't say I ever felt, like, truly scared, if that makes sense. Like, I had so much faith in my skipper and in my crew. I had so much faith in all the training we had done that I was like, "This is just like, there are steps to what we need to do, and as long as we do them, everything will be fine."
Mm.
And I also straight up gaslit myself that there was always land just over the horizon. Like, I never quite appreciated I was like, "Yeah, it's just land in the middle, like, we're just, you know, just over that line, there'll be someone." Whereas when you're in the middle of the ocean, you're closer to the space station than you are to land. So
Oh, it is like mind blowing, like talking with you about it and you sort of explaining it and also being like so normal about it. It's like, oh yeah, we just, just did this. And it is actually mind blowing. So I'm really stopping myself from being like, wow, you're so cool at any given opportunity.
I think anyone who's won Henley and or done national team racing is way cooler than I am. I think it requires a
I
lot of
think
pain.
I think that's definitely a trump card. Maybe at some point, in order to trump my husband, I need to row across the Atlantic or something. I don't think I'd manage it. My joints wouldn't quite hack it. I think I've got rheumatoid arthritis, so I'm a little bit more flimsy than I used to be. But maybe in order to trump him, that is what I need to do. That's given me food for thought.
When you're rowing across the Atlantic, you can do it as fast or slow as you like. There's such a wide range of people who've done it. So, you know, for example, my year, I did it with endometriosis. But then there was a solo rower who's quite young, 20s or 30s, who did it with a pacemaker. There was a 74-year-old man who did it solo, who's had open heart surgery twice. He's done it twice, and he's raised like £1 million for Alzheimer's UK. You have veterans who've had amputations do it in adapted boats. Like, it's so amazing.
Mm.
That like, you know, the reality is when you're rowing the ocean, you're never rowing that hard. Like, you're maybe rowing at rate 18, and you're especially if you're in a team and you can, like, sort of spread the load, like, your heart rate should never be that high because you're rowing for 30 plus days. So it is a really cool experience, and, like, you know, I think what's nice about it is that actually it's quite open. The biggest requirement is just having the absolute graft to get through the campaign.
Mm.
Um, and then the row itself is yours to do however you want to do, really. No right or wrong way to do it, just safely is the only way.
Just in the boat, preferably. One of the other bits that I sort of when I looked you up, I saw that you'd done an interview with Slovenian Vogue. Have I said that right?
Yeah, so it was Vogue Adria, so it's
Vogue,
across
sorry, Vogue Adria.
yeah, it's
Uh,
across, like, a few Balkan countries.
yeah, and one of the quotes that really stuck with me, and I think is really sort of important to mention when we're about to go into this die on the hill, is that you found like your community with rowing, found that safety, found that sport that gave you, I guess, confidence, or like that friendship group you were saying when you went to Bristol. And anyway, you're quoted saying, "My refuge, my tribe, my outlet was all robbed from me." And it really like stung me in my body to read that. I really think it will resonate with a lot of people. So I just wanted to highlight that before we went into our Dying on the Hill about raising awareness for the dropout rate of girls in sport.
Yeah, oh god, that's made me emotional to like hear that read part.
It's really, I read it and I was like, oh, this is so cool, Vogue, because I'm kind of like into my textiles and the girly pop side of me. And I was reading it and you've got all these headshots. And then I read that quote and I was like, oh God, now I'm gonna, I'm feeling really emotional just from reading that. Like, it is a feeling of, I've stopped sport for my own reasons, but I did feel that I'd found this group of people and this thing that I loved doing, and it wasn't it wasn't reality for me anymore. So when I read that from you as well, I was like, oh,
You're making me all bashful now.
you're like all tingly.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, yeah, I think rowing is such a unique sport in the sense that, like, at a grassroots level, it's so all-consuming, isn't it? It's like other sports you can sort of dip your toe in and out of and do socially. Like, I remember always being told, like, there's no such thing as social rowing, which I still maintain is not true. But I think, to a far greater extent for someone like you who's done national team, and like my husband rowed for the Canadian national team as a lightweight as well, and like watching him try to leave rowing, like I think any kind of, semi-professional, professional athlete, but then I would say like almost all rowers who give some time of their life to it, like it's so hard to leave the sport, isn't it? And no one really truly ever leaves. I feel like they always sort of have like a toe sort of half in it, in the sense that, it's so consuming. Like if you do it at university, you're going out to rowing while people are coming back in from their nights out. Like you only hang out with rowers. Let's be real. Rowers date rowers. Like it's a very tight knit pool, isn't it?
It's a mindset.
Yeah. And then like when you leave it, it's like how do you leave it? It's your social circle, and it's, if you leave it and all your friends are still in it, you get mad FOMO, don't you? And like it's also your routine. Like I didn't know how to train without a program, and also like it's that motivation for me. I was like, well, I don't know how to train for myself. Like with rowing, you train because you're letting someone else down if you don't go. Like it's such a team effort, even though rowing can also be a bit savage with like seat racing and things like that. But for me as well, like I moved to the UK when I was 3 as an immigrant. I was an immigrant kid who was undiagnosed neurodiverse at the time. Like I only got diagnosed with ADHD 6 months ago, and it's definitely been impacting my life for a long time. I was so desperate to fit in, and I really struggled, like definitely got bullied a lot growing up. And it wasn't until I found rowing and I found, sort of that routine and that place to sort of like thrive and actually get given praise for once. Because as a student, I was a very poor student. I got diagnosed dyslexic around year 9, and that changed a bit and it helped things out. But to me, rowing was everything. It like totally put me on like the right path. I could have equally, finished school with very poor grades, and I was on track for that until two things, like A, rowing, B, kind of getting a bit more support, and like that dyslexia diagnosis, and C, I had an absolutely incredible teacher, a classics teacher, who was also really passionate about rowing and was like the biggest supporter of it. So that was, that completely changed things around for me. But I was in a lot of pain.
Let's talk about your Dying on the Hill, because the phrase on the boat is turning the tide for women's sport. And the reason why you did it was to raise money and awareness for the dropout rate of girls in sport. So you're Dying on the Hill. I've drawn like a little umbrella from our conversation, because it's got some sections, and what I think is really important, or why I set this podcast up, is I want episodes to be used as tools for coaches to use or for athletes to use, and to actually gain information and knowledge and be able, in a coach's point of view, to do a better job when you're working with junior women, and from an athlete point of view, to just sort of be a bit more informed about things. So anyway, my little umbrella, I'll post it on Instagram once I post this recording, but the umbrella is girls dropping out of sport due to puberty periods and all of those sort of things that happen around that time. Then we've got endometriosis sort of midway down the shaft of the umbrella. And then at the handle, we've got the gender pain gap. I have friends who have endometriosis and I've watched them suffer, and I've understood that there is not a lot of education around it. And also, when you get your period, you're just sort of told, oh, yeah, it is going to hurt, or it is going to do this every month. And that's quite normal. And there isn't a lot of education as to how much pain is too much pain. So anyway, I did a little deep dive, or I would say a little deep dive. I did a Google on endometriosis, and the first few things I could find were 1 in 10 women are affected by it, and it's a chronic condition, and it can also sometimes be passed down genetically, or it can also sometimes be triggered by external stressor issues. So could you dive deeper into it for me? What is endometriosis, and how is it typically coming about in the symptoms?
I think the first, like, really important thing to talk about when we talk about endometriosis is just that, frankly, like, they know very little about it. Um, so that's, like, the primary problem. We don't actually know what causes it. More and more research is being done thanks to campaign groups who are, as you know, when we talk about pain gaps, we also talk about research gaps. And there's a huge lack of research into conditions that predominantly affect women. So 1 in 10 women have it, which is wild that we don't have more research into it for that extent. But I think accepted description is that cells that are similar to, but not the same as, the kind of the lining of your uterus, like endometrium, somehow seems to grow outside of the uterus. And what it can do as it grows and grows and grows is it can cause lesions and adhesions where, like, it's essentially like gluing parts of your body together. It's typically been associated with, like, a menstrual condition, because obviously, like, people used to think it was the exact same sort of cells, like that lining somehow escaped. And it typically, like, seems to grow around your lower abdomen. That said, there is research and evidence of endometriosis all the way up into the lungs and things like that. So new discoveries are made all the time. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that it can be very hard to diagnose because it doesn't really come up on scans. It has to be quite far progressed, and you have to have quite a lot of adhesions for it to show up on scans. But the amount of endometriosis you have and the pain correlated, there's research to say, like, they're not, there's no sort of correlation between amount and pain. Like, there's some people who have a lot of it all over their organs, but who might not necessarily be in a lot of pain, and then some people have a small amount. It kind of depends on where it grows, how deep it grows, and things like that.
Mm.
The other thing that I learned the other day from a doctor is there's a version of endometriosis called occult endometriosis, where it's microscopic. So they can't actually see it even when they open you up. So for these reasons, it can be really hard to diagnose, and the gold standard is a laparoscopy. So for them to, put a keyhole cut into you and put in a camera and be able to see it and then excise it, so cut it out, but it can grow back. It's a very complicated disease in that sense that it can be very hard to diagnose. It can be very hard to catch. Even if you have surgery, they can miss some of it. It can grow back. It won't necessarily grow back. Like, we're learning more and more about it every day. The other reason it's typically considered a menstrual condition is because a very big symptom of it is period pain. So very severe period pain. We're talking, like, not being able to concentrate, not being able to stand, not being able to cope without painkillers kind of thing. And there are other symptoms like bleeding outside of your periods, bloating. So like endobelly is a really known symptom where you have very severe bloat, brain fog, body pain, pain down your legs, pain down your back. It's just a very unpleasant condition, really. I think, the reason it takes so long to diagnose is everyone experiences it differently. I do understand that it should be a last resort to do surgery. I've had 2 surgeries, and recently I actually went to see a doctor because I was given a Mirena coil to manage my endometriosis because I don't respond well to oral contraceptives. The idea being that it would reduce my periods and sort of, like, help manage the symptoms. It's not a cure, just to be very clear. But unfortunately, my coil perforated, so I had to have surgery to get it removed. And then the surgeon, I asked him, I was like, well, while we're there, should we do a keyhole? And he was like, no, I mean, I'd rather not, because, like, the solution isn't to keep cutting it out for you at a young age, because every time you do surgery, obviously, you're also creating scar tissue, so that carries its own risks. I was, from 16, 15, I started developing really severe pain. So I had period pains that was like, what I was told was fairly standard, but I have visceral memories of like lying on the floor on my back in the school locker room, just like unable to stand. And then I had a lot of my pain was in my leg, so everyone was convinced I had like a tear in the cartilage of my hip or like bursitis, and people offered help. Like the school had a physio for first team people, so I got to go see this physio, and like I went for MRIs, and like no, it doesn't show up on scans, so no one knew what it was. I had that classic thing of being told to go on one contraceptive pill to another contraceptive pill, and my like period pains and this pain were being treated as two separate things. And then what made it all harder, and I'm sure a lot of women, or anyone who menstruates can relate to this, was that whenever I would be feeling this way, I would have coaches be like, oh, it's not that bad. Like, or don't be lazy. Or why aren't you trying? Or like, if I'm like, I can't train today, they're like, well, then you're not going to make it into the crew. And there was no education, there was no understanding, there was none of that. And I was like, well, this is why, looking back on it, I was like, this is why girls quit sport, right? Because I got tired of having to convince people that I wasn't lazy. And I got tired of having to convince people that my pain was real. And, kids are mean and they're like, oh, are you sore again today? And it's like, because you do sound like a one-track, like, disc, right? Like you're constantly saying something. So when I took a gap here after I finished school, and I rode briefly at Tideway Scullers, but just the pain just got so bad. And it got to the point that I was embarrassed to just like not be showing up to training and things. So I just quit. I quit sport like altogether. And then when I went to uni, I tried to pick up some different sports. I played basketball for a while and American football. I thought it would help because I thought like, oh, it's a leg injury. Like, I can't get over it through rowing. But eventually that caught up to me as well. And it wasn't until in 2017 I had endometriosis surgery finally. And the only reason I had that is I was once walking with a friend who was a rower, and she was telling me about this condition she had. Every symptom she was describing resonated with me. And I was like, what is this condition? And she was like, oh, it's endometriosis. And I did my own research, and I like fully argued with doctors for years to get seen for this. Think like, I got put on like 7 different contraceptive pills in a row, and I also got like subjected to like monthly STD tests because they just wouldn't believe me that it wasn't that. And I was like, I promise you, like, I was like, why are you treating me like this? As if I'm some sort of like irresponsible teenager, like. So then in 2017, I got surgery and they found it, and it was on the back of my uterus and a ligament. So like totally explained the pain in my left leg. And like I said, like a month later, I was back in a boat at preseason at Bristol rowing. And I was like, this is like this tiny laparoscopic surgery has like completely changed my life, because while I wasn't doing sport, like we said, like I lost that social circle, I lost my motivation, I lost my outlet, and like my mental health declined massively. And my quality of life sucked.
I just think it's so funny, and not in a funny ha-ha way, in a funny, I guess kind of sad way, that it always ends up being conversations with other women where you suddenly work this thing out, or you suddenly realise, oh my God, that might be what's wrong with me, or maybe this is a condition that I should look into. And that's why I think female conversations are so important. Like, yeah, maybe we do get labeled as gossips, but it is a sharing of information, and it is a sharing of knowledge.
And it's crazy that this like short keyhole surgery completely changed my life. And like I went to Bristol and I made a new set of friends, and I started rowing again, and I'd finished my law degree, and it was unreal. And it's like I can't describe, like, it wasn't until long after that I realized like how much like being in daily pain was completely limiting my life. I dropped out of my first attempt at uni, and things like that. So like without sport, like I was completely untethered. So that's a very long answer, sorry, to
No,
an
it's
emotional
good.
question.
Oh, it's good.
It's a really hard condition to like balance, and everyone will experience it differently. I think that's the important thing to remind ourselves of. I think what makes it really hard is some people start developing symptoms pretty much, from the point that they start having their periods, although some research seems to suggest that it can grow even before then. I don't want to say this personally, but I would say that, like, from my experience as a young girl, and I'm sure a lot of people, is like, it seems to be very easy for adults to dismiss young girls. I can't tell you how many times growing up I got called dramatic by like teachers and coaches, and my controversial opinion, and maybe I'm jumping ahead here, is like, I don't think you should be a coach to female athletes if you don't have a bare minimum level of understanding of women's health, because I don't think you can be a quality coach if you don't understand that. I think it should be your job to educate, it should be your job to understand, and you should have a basic level awareness of working around women's menstrual cycles and be the first point of call and safeguarding if they start hearing these symptoms, to signpost them to a doctor. And I think so many girls have been let down by their sports coaches who have probably, played a heavy role in them quitting sport altogether. And it's not as if girls don't have more than enough reasons to quit sport every day. And then we have these people who are supposed to be championing us who are completely letting us down. So yeah, I think the primary place to start with endometriosis is education and getting people to learn about it, both as professionals working with young women in sport, but also educating young girls in school about it so that they can advocate for themselves as well.
I've got in my notes here that 64% of girls will quit sports by the time they finish puberty at 16 to 17. And that's because of all, because our menstrual cycle starts, our bodies change, it becomes this thing. And 64% is like a ridiculous percentage of people. And then you're adding in different conditions, so like endometriosis. There's so many other parts that play, and I completely agree that if you're a coach and you're working regularly with women or junior women, you should have an understanding, and you should also be able to have some form of conversation about it without squealing away. Because I find that is often the case. It's like, oh, you should go and talk to the female coach that we have about this, or you should go and talk to your mum and dad about this, or it's not, I don't know. I don't know the answer, or I don't want to know about, periods and stuff like that. I was thinking about this last night as I was going to bed. How can you sort of be an ally without knowing that much about it? Like, how could you even sort of show or start to show? And I think one of the most basic things is your junior women's changing room should have a box of emergency supplies.
Absolutely.
And your club could fund that, and it could keep it stocked up, or not even emergency supplies, just supplies in general. So tampons, pads, you could even go as far as to put like a spare pair of pants in there, or, whatever it is. But even if you went into a women's bathroom and you saw that and you were like, oh, okay, this is actually a women's bathroom, or this is a junior women's space, or this is somebody that is thinking that we might need this. Like, this is somebody who is open-minded to this conversation, as opposed to somebody who's going to run in the opposite direction as soon as a tampon falls out my bag.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see a future where no one has to slide a tampon up their sleeve,
Mm,
because it is just what it is. I now go out of my way to not try and make it easier for other people, if that makes sense.
mm,
Because who am I making it easier for? If I need to carry a pad through the office, I carry it in my hand. Or if one pretty big thing I'm trying to do now is not deny my pain. So if someone in the office is like, "How you doing?" I'll be like, "I'm in agony today. Thanks for asking." And then it opens the conversation, because they might be like, "Oh, why?" And I'll be like, "Well, I have this condition called endometriosis and I'm flaring really badly today." And I think just not, I think unfortunately growing up, it's a very common experience amongst women to learn to not make people uncomfortable and not push the boat and just be, just sort of suffer in silence. And it's like, well, why? Why is it the more we do that, the more taboo the subject becomes, and then nothing ever changes. So, you know, be really loud about it. And I mean, I really let myself down on my row, and I'll be the first person to admit that, where towards the end of my row, I began experiencing really severe pain, the Atlantic row. I fell into the trap of going, oh, this is just endometriosis. I've just overdone it. I just started taking painkillers every 4 hours for the last few days and totally ignored what it was. But I was in a lot of pain, really severe pain. But it was in my back and abdomen. So I was just like, oh, this is just this. Got to Antigua, pain sort of kept flaring, coming and going. And I was like, no, this isn't going to ruin my holiday. I'm here for 10 days. Just finished rowing the Atlantic for 39 days. I'm going to enjoy this. Flew to Serbia pretty much straight away. And then the pain got really bad, to the point they're crawling on the floor bad. And my mum convinced me to go get a blood test, and I was like, fine. So I went and got the blood test, came back clear. as so many people will recognize, like, this is an experience where, like, things are going wrong and your tests will come back clear. My mum wanted me to get an ultrasound and I said no. I was like, "Nah, everything is fine. Like, it's just endo. It's just endo." Like, fast forward, like, 5 days, I'm in the A&E with sepsis. So, like, it's because I completely, like, I just fell into my own trap of being like, "No, I don't wanna, like, rock the boat. Like, I don't wanna, like, do anything about, like, oh, it's just this, like, I know what this is," and it's just like, yeah. So, off the back of that, and I think I wrote about it maybe in one of my articles, like, I kind of made a promise to myself to, like, never downplay my pain again, and it's unfortunate that that was a lesson I had to have to, like, do that, but I think to me that's been a really important thing moving forward, and now to maybe at the point that I do make people uncomfortable, I talk about these things, because that sort of mentality that we were taught all our lives genuinely put me in the hospital. So it's just not something I'm interested in doing anymore.
Mm.
So yeah, I talk about it pretty loudly. I've had the few opportunities to start going into schools and talking about endometriosis and polycystic ovaries. I think it does start there. It's just like having the tools to advocate for yourself is super important. And when we talk about coaches, I think twofold, like, A, to your point, having those resources on hand, having that education as well, like, you know, it's in RE or whatever they call it these days, social sciences and things like
Yeah, I
that.
was gonna say social science, but also there's lots of workshops
Mm,
now that you can go and do just to, just to further your own education.
yeah. But I firmly believe when you are a teacher or a coach, you legally have a duty of care to that athlete or to that child. More so when you're working with kids, obviously you need to have a DBS check, you need to do safeguarding, you need to do, like, a degree of training. If you are a coach to female athletes, if you are making money of coaching female athletes in particular, you have a duty of care. You have a responsibility to that athlete to keep them safe and healthy. And if you are not making the effort, no, you said you went and Googled endometriosis, you learned plenty of what you needed to know through, like, what, a 10-minute Google? Like,
Yeah.
what's stopping both female and male coaches from doing so? I truly think you have a responsibility. If you were an S&C coach, for example, you'd probably be constantly looking up new research because it's important to what you do. But we need to be mindful that we're looking at research that is also taking women into account. And we're seeing it more in the mainstream media now. We've seen so many footballers get ACL tears, and it's become
Yeah.
very clear that it's happening to women to a unprecedented degree, and part of that is to do with the fact that shoes historically have been men's shoes made smaller, and that's not appropriate, but also that there does seem to be an impact of where you are in your cycle and your degree of risk for injury. So I'm not saying a school coach needs to delve in that deep, but they should have a base level of understanding that if they have a student who's saying I'm in pain, that they don't default to, oh, you're lazy or you're dramatic. Like, instead,
Mm.
it's, hey, here are some, like, leaflets that are in the women's changing room. Maybe this can give you, like, I mean, that is, like, the lowest level of effort in my opinion, but it's something to help them advocate for themselves and hopefully figure out what's going on so that they can enjoy their life and enjoy their sport without the added pressure of pretending like they're not in pain. So, that is the hill
I
to die on.
it is a really good hill to die on, and it's so funny because I did know about endometriosis and I have friends who have it, but off the top of my head, I still needed to, like, Google it to double check the facts on it. Like, even as a woman, I didn't have enough of, like, the concrete information to sort of come on a call and be like, "I know everything about this." So, I do, yeah, when you say it is men's and or male and female coaches, like, we both need to put the effort and the energy in to make sure that we have the right information and also are able to, like, signpost people in the right directions. Um,
Yeah.
I completely agree, and yeah, that was what I was gonna say. There's plenty of workshops that are available, and some of them are free, and they will give you a basic understanding of what you're looking at, what to expect. So I think we did a podcast a few weeks back with Gosha and Susie talking about red S and, like, just the basic sort of hormones that we're dealing with on a monthly cycle and how that's going to affect your mood and your training. And, because our periods can be a very natural ergonomic aid to our performances with our hormones, but also they can be at great detriment. And conditions like endometriosis, as you said, are like the opposite end of the scale.
But that said, any issue in any chronic health condition, like, can be affected by that. I mean, I can't speak to your experience with rheumatoid arthritis, but, you know, there is plenty of research to say that, like, the way menstruating people experience autoimmune, like, I mean, endometriosis ultimately, I think, is going towards being diagnosed as an autoimmune condition, or maybe has already. I guess the point is, unfortunately, across many sectors, but in medicine in particular, there just, like, hasn't been research done on women. So, like, it is an issue across grassroots like, elite athletes, that we're sort of having to, like, guess as we go through,
Mm,
because a lot of the treatment that we're getting is catered towards male research and male, like, understanding.
yeah.
Um, so, it's
Well,
not just an endometriosis issue, it's like a completely different physiology that everything that we do is based on, So all the
mm,
tests that we do, all the, like, standards that we do, it's often just a reduced version of the men's version, right? So it's not built for us at all.
yeah. I often like to say that I'm not a small man. Like I am completely different, and my physiology is different. And when I was initially dealing with my original symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, I was just put on naproxen,
Mm.
which is a really strong sort of painkiller, and but there was no there was no delve deeper into what the problem could be. I was just put on very, very strong painkillers. And at the time, it was sort of like, oh, we'll just see when that sort of sorts it out. And obviously, it didn't sort it out. And, when you go on, that was the other thing that I meant to sort of say. When you're on painkillers for a prolonged period of time, they do fuck your gut up.
Oh,
And like,
yeah.
they do mess with your, what's the word?
Yeah, biome.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say they mess with your poop schedule.
Fair. Yeah, totally messes your
I was
gut
just
up,
gonna
doesn't
go
it?
straight in. They mess with
Yeah, I
your
love it.
poop schedule massively.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, definitely. And, like, your gut is your second brain, right, as well, so,
Mm,
like, it then has an impact on mental health as well, so
mm.
it's yeah. No, it's wild.
I just wanted to go back quickly to the bit about how it's like 64% of girls that are gonna quit sport by the time they finish puberty. The primary reasons that sort of sprung to mind, but also are just easily accessible out there on Google: body image and confidence, menstruation, lack of role models, uncomfortable kit, and lack of opportunities. I always remember like my PE kit when I was at school, because it was like so uncool to do PE when I was at school. And you wouldn't like bring a hairband just so you could get out of your PE lesson.
Yeah.
And if you didn't bring a hairband, then the teacher would like find an elastic band to like make you tie your hair up and do PE. But I remember the kit that we used to wear was like a skirt and
Yeah.
like a yellow polo top. I just remember it being so horrible.
I really recommend looking up on YouTube after this. ASICS just did a campaign around, co-designing a new PE kit with the girls,
Mm.
and it'll make you really emotional. It's a
Oh,
great piece of work. It's a fantastic campaign from ASICS because it's all around that. It's the girls saying, like, "I don't wanna wear this kit," and they're like, "Well, let's make one that you want to wear then." And it's really emotional. But to your stat of, like, 60 was it 64% of girls, it's even worse when you hear a second stat, which is over 90% of women in C-suite positions in their, like, careers played sport in their youth. So there's a research link between professional outcomes and having done sport in your youth, which makes sense when you think about it just, like, from our own experience, right? Like, sport gives you teamwork, it gives you resilience, it gives you so much.
mm,
Um, and we are denying girls and women these opportunities to, like, build up these, like, skills that are so crucial later in life, through all these different hurdles. When you look at a picture of our boat, Sarabi, from the road, you notice all these swirly patterns on it. If you were to zoom in on those swirly patterns, there's actually text in them, and they're all genuine stories of why people left sport, from young girls to just, like, older people as well. And a lot of it was, health reasons, like pain, some mothers just not having time to do it. Slightly sadder stories, to be totally honest, of, like, incidences of assault within their team. where they felt like they had to leave. Unfortunately, I think that's a conversation that needs to be had in rowing a lot, and is being had, but that's a separate conversation. But yeah, you have all these different reasons, lack of equipment, and it's all the additional hurdles. I talk about it with some of my male colleagues. It's easy enough for them in the middle of winter to go do their five-a-side football in the middle of a common. I know plenty of women who don't feel comfortable crossing a common at night for safety reasons. It's all the additional mental load that female athletes have to add. It's not as simple as, I'm going to go play football tonight. It's, I need kit that's going to keep me safe and warm. I need to think about what I'm going to wear while I walk there. I need to think about, do I need to text people? Do I need to put them on find my friends? There's all these different things that we need to think about. And if you think about the life stresses that a 15, 16-year-old girl is having anyway, it's like, of course they're going to drop out. It's so hard for them. If they have kids bullying them for spots, they're going to go, well, then I'll sweat less. Or, I mean, I'm sure you had this, but growing up, I had so many extended family. Thankfully, not my immediate family. My mum was my staunchest supporter. Tell me oh, you're rowing. Well, you don't want to get big like a man.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's just
yeah.
that we internalize all that. No wonder girls are dropping out when some of the closest people to them are their first bullies.
Mm,
It's, and it goes so much further than them just dropping out of sport. Another huge reason is it actually comes from inter-friend group peer pressure. And once you have one friend drop out of sport, they'll start pressuring their friends to drop out because they're like, well, why would you spend time doing that? Why don't you spend time with me doing these other things?
mm,
There's only limited time in a day to pursue your hobbies when you're a teenager, right? So
yeah. I started rowing with a group of girls, and I was the only one that carried on. They
it's
all quit.
sad, isn't it?
Mm,
It's so sad. And then you feel this pressure of well, should I leave?
mm,
But
yeah.
yeah, I don't know. This is a
Yeah.
heavy topic.
It is a
But
heavy topic. It's a very good one though. I am very, very, very much enjoying it. I am conscious that we're gonna yap into the rest of your day. So
I
while
do
we're
love
in
a
the
good one.
heavy side of the topic, do you have a best fuck up over the years of your sporting experience that you wanna share?
What do you
So it can be very funny and light-hearted, or you might have a very serious one that you want to sort of bring in.
I've got one of each. I can
Oh, you
give
got
you
one of each. We can do
yeah.
serious and non-serious.
Okay, so my serious one, I would say, I think my biggest fuck up was there was a point where I was coaching novices at university when I decided to finish rowing. And my biggest fuck up that I think about daily was I fell straight into the trap of every rowing coach I've ever had, where for all my talk now about being more gentle and more understanding, I think rowing coaches are notoriously quite brutal people. And I fell into that thing of just work harder. And having now, done the Atlantic Row, educated myself so much more, that is such a regret for me that I had a chance to be that person for someone and I failed on it. And it's a huge motivator for me to do things like this now and talk about it and try and spread awareness because I think I needed to hear it myself rather than live through it. So my biggest fuck up is not learning to take my own advice earlier and being that more compassionate coach when I had the opportunity to be. I just like I said, I just did exactly the way I was taught rather than breaking that cycle. And then my funniest one, my most embarrassing sporting story was I was never that athletic growing up until I started rowing, and I did a school sports day. I think it was in year 9. So how old are you in year 9?
You're 14-ish?
Yeah, 14. That's going to justify this absolute screw up. And I did the hurdle, and my school for a while, we did our sports day in Crystal Palace, the stadium, the sports track, which was really cool.
Okay.
A little bit posh, I won't deny, but yeah, so doing the hurdles, my mum's in the stands, and I am not a fast runner, but somehow I was the worst of the best in this race, and I finished the last hurdle first. But having never done hurdles in my life, I genuinely got thrown into this and I didn't know you had to run that little extra bit. So finished the last hurdle, put my hands up in the air, celebrated, and my mum was just standing there keep running! And then I was dead last. To this day, that keeps me up at night. I, prematurely celebrated the fact that I had somehow done well and then lost anyway.
That sports day at that age is a terrifying thing. You get thrown into all sorts of different things. They're like, we need someone who can do high jump. You're quite tall. Could you just step over the bar, please?
But this truly haunts me. It's Yeah, you don't that could have been the difference between my career as a hurdler or not, right? So,
Could have gone down
uh,
a completely different route.
no, genuinely mortifying. Absolutely terrible. I think
But
that
I
was
think
probably one of the
what you
biggest.
said about the coaching is, like, really interesting, and I think a lot of people will resonate with that from a coaching point of view is when you initially go into it, you almost go in doing exactly what you have had done to you, and also you're like, "Well, I've done this, you can get on with it as well," sort of
Yeah,
thing, like, it's a rite of passage in order for it to be really hard. I did sort of 8 years of coaching alongside my 12 years of rowing, and I worked with 2 different junior groups. When I initially went to the 2nd junior group, I think I was more firm and I really needed to, like, prove a point at the start, and then once there was, like, that level of respect and understanding, then, there was a chance for me to be softer almost, and I don't think I got it right all the time, but I do know I got a fair few bits of it right in terms of, conversation with junior women and body image and I don't have all the knowledge on periods, but it was definitely a conversation that was open and, it was an open table of discussion. But I really resonate with like going in and you're trying to get it right and you're like overly firm almost.
yeah,
And
you
then,
overcommit.
then you're like, "Oh, I didn't mean to do that."
Yeah, and you're like, "Oh, I've just become the one thing I hated." Like, just that coach that's just so, like, harsh, and it's like, oh, honestly, it makes me cringe when I think back on it. I'm like, "Oh, this is a complete flop from me."
There will have been like definitely be like one-liners that come back round that have stuck with people and it has been really, special for them. So I wouldn't beat yourself up about it. I'm sure I've heard far worse over my years of being coached or being around coaches. Do you have a piece of advice that you would want to share with a younger version of yourself or just women in sports in general?
I do. And I appreciate it's easier said than done, but, like, I think I'm trying to think of a pithy way to say it, but, like, don't make yourself smaller. Like, what you feel is valid and, like, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself or leave a situation that isn't right for you, but just don't quit sport. Would
Yeah.
be, find another way to enjoy it, with people who uplift you, would definitely be the experience because, like, sport is just so much fun when you have the right group of people around you, and it should never be painful. It should be hard. Like, it should be hard, it should be tough. You will have to, like, dig deep, but it should never be, like, costing you your health would be my biggest piece of advice.
Mm. I think the way I used to have that conversation a lot with one of my junior girls. I think the way I phrased it was take up space.
Yeah, for
Or don't
sure.
be afraid to take up space because there's definitely a point in when working with junior women where, as you say, everyone starts to go through puberty and you do often see people visibly try and make themselves smaller or they start sentences with or they make themselves smaller and it was always a big conversation for me, which was take up space. Like you don't need to make yourself small. Like you exist. You don't need to starve yourself. You don't need to start a sentence with what you're saying is valid. You can stand up straight, and I'm definitely guilty as a coach for one girl like constantly making her restart the conversation. If she started with I'd be like, let's try that again. And she would giggle about it. I'm sure the first few times she was mortified, but it became a bit of an internal joke. So I think it was all right in the end, but definitely taking up space.
Sport gives you so much, like, coming back to that tribe, so, like, just really stick with it would be the other thing, like, don't leave sport, it gives you so much, like,
Mm.
you know, you might just need to change the way or where you're experiencing it, but never let anyone drive you clear out of it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. My final question, because I know we've chatted a lot.
Oh, it's
Um,
been such a pleasant start to a Monday morning.
oh, good. I'm glad. It's been I really enjoyed it. My final question is, if you're going to the gym or if you're doing sport, what music are you playing, or what song is the soundtrack for this week?
Oh my god, this week it's K-pop Demon Hunters, and it has
Oh,
been for, like, 3 weeks. Genuinely on repeat. It's
you're
been
like
exclusively
shameless
K-pop Demon
K-pop
Hunters.
demon hunters.
K-pop Demon Hunters has been healing my inner child since I watched it.
I watched it as well.
I'm fully part of the obsessed group of people with it. I love it, and, like, I've just been listening to it on repeat. Not the coolest answer, but it's the honest answer.
I wasn't sure if you're gonna go with, Eye of the Tiger, because that's what you mentioned, the yacht people with the speaker, but yeah, okay, K-pop demon hunters.
That is the honest answer. Like, if I was sharing my Spotify now, it would be K-pop Demon Hunters.
Like, you are in the top 1%.
I'm honestly dreading Wrapped. I think it's gonna be really scathing.
Is it gonna be a sort of one that you don't post anywhere on social media? Just
No,
like,
I
"I'll
think
keep
I
this to
just will
myself."
have to. I'm just gonna be like, "No." K-pop Demon Hunters is a great story and a great message. So
A banger. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
it is. I made my husband watch it with me as well, and he was like, "Okay."
So did I, and he actually got into it. But
Yeah, Matt got into it as well, but he was like, "The message, because it's obviously designed for children, no offense to us, but obviously it's designed for children, but and as an adult, you can see, like, the underlying themes and the messages so clearly.
mm,
So it was, like, a really interesting, almost experience watching it.
yeah.
Anyway, that is that is all of my questions.
This has been so fun. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on and, yeah, sharing your experience and the conversation about endometriosis. Obviously, it's, like, private, but I just think it's so important to sort of get out there and share so many different experiences. So I really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much for giving me the platform to talk about it. And I really
You're
hope I've
welcome.
convinced more people to row across an ocean because it's quite an experience.